Hello, everyone. One of the goals I had with this podcast was to have very good conversations with people outside the church. So we are having that, the real world type of talks that people have when they wander outside the church. It's not just an insider conversation. But part of that is the necessity to talk about some of the quirks and things that occur when religion are the habits and attitudes and communal practices that we have in our relationship to God. When religion is executed badly, what are some of the fallout from that? And I wanted to have those conversations with someone with whom I could have it in a perhaps humorous, in a non-jaded way, but speaking frankly about some of the things that occur when it doesn't go quite the way it should. And I couldn't think of anyone better with whom to have that conversation than my own sister, Gaylene. Now, she lives pretty far away from me, and so we needed to use Zoom to have this conversation. But years ago, she had read a book called Cultish that dealt with the certain habits, the cultish habits that can be adopted sometimes just as a natural human quirk. They can be adopted sometimes even amongst pretty decent religious traditions that take on, but start descending into something that is just not helpful, or needs to be identified so that we can try to avoid some of those ways in which we as people can sometimes screw up a good thing. Anyway, Gaylene and I, we grew up in the same household. We have wonderful parents, and even with all that, with being able to be so thankful for our childhood and the family that we have, still had religious experiences that we can now joke about now, and still identify in some rather objective way. What are some of the habits that sometimes can filter their way into religious traditions, even decent ones, even good ones? That sometimes can be unhelpful overall with the way people need to relate to God. Anyway, so this is the first of those conversations. So join us as we explore this together. All right. Okay.
This is fun.
I know, right? So,
No.
Okay. Well, I appreciate you talking with me. It's funny because we had some time ago had the conversation about, but you had read a book that was entitled Cultish.
Yes.
And I wanted to dive into that a little bit. And the reason why I wanted to kind of preface this a little bit. You're familiar with Leah Remini,
Yes.
who had that TV series on Scientology and the aftermath. And as I watched through all that, I became riveted over time because it was very interesting to me. Obviously, I've taken a career path whereby I see the value and the positive aspects of religious practice.
Right.
But at least as much as I consider there to be all these positive aspects of human expression contained in all these practices, specifically as it relates to how you relate to the divine and so forth, the dark side of that is it's just as harmful as it can be. It can be just as harmful as everything I claim to be beneficial. And so when someone is harmed by religious practice, the most often the reaction that they have is not, let me go find some positive expressions of, some positive examples of religious expression. Most often the reaction is, screw this. I don't want to do with this at all, or any religious practice at all.
Right.
And as a result, I felt like frank conversations need to happen about the harm that happens from bad religious practice. And I just think that we have to be very upfront about it. We can't shy away from it. And so I think that's part of a responsible conversation that people have, especially the insider conversation. Most often people who are the insiders, they don't want to talk about those things. They're like, oh, we just have great experiences here all the time.
Right. Yeah.
But I had a great professor one time who said, many people are looking for a perfect church, but if you find one, don't join it, for crying out loud, you'll ruin it.
Yes. Yeah.
Because if it's got people in it, it's going to be funky.
So could
Right.
you tell me a little bit about the book you read, and you will use that as a catalyst to get into some of our fun experiences growing up too.
Yes, personal experiences. Yes. So to be perfectly transparent, I read this book quite a while
Okay.
back. It's been a few years.
Okay.
And also on that note, I have a very weird obsession with cults. I don't know why it is. I watch a lot of cult documentaries. I don't know why. I just find it fascinating.
It's like that or true crime.
Exactly. And then when it's mixed together, even better. So
did I tell you I have close association with a pastor who's still serving life sentence for killing his wife in Texas?
no,
Yeah.
no.
No.
This is like a whole other discussion.
Oh, I
Wow.
know. No. You could Google a pastor by the name of Matt Baker, and I was watching one of those true crime
What?
shows one time,
Right.
and I came across the the Texas murder pastor,
Yeah.
and he had apparently he'd gone weird, and decided that he wanted to have a mistress and try to get and to get past the idea that that he's married. He actually eventually he's found guilty of murdering his wife. Well, Matt and Carrie, these are people that we had over for dinner, and our kids had played with their kids.
What? Really?
Exactly right. So no,
Yeah.
So when you talk about true crime and weird religion coming together,
right. Exactly. Yeah. So, I mean, I think that the book was very interesting to me. So when I knew we were going to do this, I went back and I listened to parts of it with the podcast the audiobook to refresh my memory. And actually I got a lot more out of it with certain things that I found really interesting and wrote down a bunch of notes. But things I think that hit me this time that I didn't pick up on as much before. So many things, but one thing I guess I hadn't thought about before is this idea of that only certain people, there's a certain type of person that, and I felt like this, I had this bias. I've always had certain type of people that would get sucked into a cult. Like how
right.
I've always been fascinated with how does this happen? What is going on? And even watching documentaries about cults, it's like has recently stood out to me. A lot of these people are well educated. They're not all coming from a life of trauma or broken families or whatever. And why is that? What is it that makes people susceptible? And I think that's what stood out to me the second time around was trying to understand. And I took some notes on this. That one part that I did re-listen to was talking about oftentimes they found there's people that are really actually hopeful, that kind of are generally good-natured people that kind of tend to be optimistic. And I was like, wow, that flies in the face of what most people think. I think, in terms of a cult, there must be something wrong with someone if they're susceptible to these crazy things that people are saying. And it's just not that easy. It's complicated, like life is. It's not there's not a one type of person that's going to be, susceptible to that, and for different reasons. And sometimes people, they're good. They just, slowly hear things that they're optimistic about the world and they believe some of these things can happen. So that stood out to me. And I really enjoyed that book, but also the part of it about language. And you and I have talked about this before, growing up in the church and, evangelical church, and how just the like church speak, so
It's its
that
own
kind of stuff
language,
is just fun. And yeah, exactly. Um, and how it triggers. I mean, I feel very fortunate. I don't have a negative association.
Right.
In my head, I'm thankful for that because, like you said, a lot of people run the other way if they have negative experience. But some things I just look at and think it's just kind of funny, and it triggers memories of the time. People using certain I don't know if I want to. I don't want to offend anybody, so I won't get into some of the the little terms and stuff like that. But even she used those as examples, and I thought, oh my gosh, I remember that. I remember these things popping up and from a certain time of life. And,
Well,
it's all well meaning, but it is interesting, the whole language part.
I'll give you a good example though, because obviously I'm very much in that arena where
Yeah.
the specific language and lexicon of this subculture is chock full of a lot of pregnant terms that people often refuse to define. So, like I was talking with someone the other day, and we talked about the term calling, and what does that mean when someone's calling, and we tend to use the word calling as though someone is somehow was grabbed off the street and shanghaied into Christian service in a manner that was completely divorced from your personality, your upbringing, your proclivities, your internal constitution, and as though
it came to you
somehow,
out of nowhere. Yes,
right. You're taking, kicking, and screaming. But there's a lot of really internal language that occurs there. I mean, anthropologists will oftentimes more readily separate people groups by language than by any other rubric. And so within specific religious subcultures, you oftentimes can tell who you're talking to just because by how someone tells you, well, the Lord led me to XYZ, or I'm just following God, or the way in which they describe how they're just giving it over to Jesus, or you just kind of let go and let God. And there's certain catchphrases that you think, okay, that makes no sense outside. Exactly right. That makes no sense outside of your, very bounded small social space. And I mean, and I catch myself doing that too, because oftentimes I'm trying to talk with people, say out in the rest of the world, and I have to catch myself on that Christianese. Because now I might as well be talking an entirely different language, and now it's not happening at all. But it is a means of separation. When I can use the language and you can't, I've been able to establish myself as the insider, and you're the outsider.
Right. And it's not intended that way, but it just is. It's like, I mean, and a very, very well-meaning, nothing in and of itself is, there's no ill intention, but I think that for some people, they can feel like I want to be a part of that. I want to be, and others may feel that more on that side where you said feeling separated and out of the club.
Right.
So,
well, it's funny because you talk about how the psychology of someone, it's not necessarily the down and out person that's attracted to a cult. It could be someone wand very hopeful, rather optimistic. And I wonder if it's someone who might actually have a positive view of humanity, and that gives them a greater, even greater satisfaction of belonging.
I think so. In fact, that's funny. I remember that part of the book. I think I took notes on that when she mentioned that. It did. A lot of people, case studies, people that maybe grew up in a family of parents that were, activists or, very involved in the community, which really kind of flies in the face of what I think conventional thought is on that. You know?
Well, the idea of cultish is that when we look at religious practices, oftentimes we're trying to avoid being uncharitable and just, say, oh, something did something quirky, so that's Jim Jones and Guyana, right? We're trying to stop short of just equating them to, the Branch Davidians in Waco, or, Heaven's Gate and Hale Bop, so forth.
Right.
We're trying to stop short of that, but we look at some of those tendencies and go, okay. Controlling mechanisms, isolation from others. I remember specifically growing up, sometimes we could be in a youth group where I'm sorry, I don't want to trigger you too much, but
no, I agree.
Youth group, and there's very much the in group, out group, right? You're the youth group. You're in the youth group because anytime something's going on with the youth group, you want to be there, because if you're not a youth group, then you're obviously out someplace doing something untoward or what you shouldn't be doing. And so everything being in the youth group is possible. And as a result, those who were the youth group for every event, there's a hierarchy of spirituality that occurs there, right?
Exactly. Are you going a couple times a week or just one time a week because your parents are making you go when you're in junior high? Yeah, I mean, definitely. I think it was more subtle, but that was definitely the case. And some of it, I don't know how much of it was just me feeling like I'm not kind of living up to the whatever that standard was at the time,
Uh-huh.
when you're a junior hire and you're already feeling like you're not sure
Right.
if you're part of the club or not, you know, whether it's school or at church. So it was really interesting.
Well,
Yeah.
if you failed to bring all of your rock tapes to the burning somehow, to that to
Somehow.
that to that
Yeah.
tape burning and to that record burning, it's
Oh
more than
my
likely
goodness.
you were listening to something that was, if you played it back, you were listening to something with backward mastering at home.
Right, exactly. I mean, and then going back to, I feel like there's so much, so much positive, but there were some of those things that now, I mean, this book really kind of took me back, and she was talking about that time period
Right.
and the satanic panic time period, which
Right.
was my era. I mean,
Oh
I don't
yeah.
know if you may have been that might have been a little bit before you, but it was full force at that time.
Well, that extended well into the early '90s,
Yeah.
and a lot of reputations were destroyed over
Ugh,
people accusing daycares of, there was a demon under
right.
every rock.
Right.
And
Yeah.
but I remember specifically, I think it was someone asked, Motley Crue, why do you have a pentagram on just about every album cover? And they were hoping to get something of their satanic background, and their view
Mhm.
was sells records. I mean,
It sells records.
they were capitalists who just wanted
Mhm.
to be edgy. And did I tell you I took Jessica to a Kiss tribute band?
Oh, you did. Yes.
And
Yes.
this
I
was at
love
the
that.
Redneck Country Club, and she was just mortified. She was
Yes.
just mortified because she's like, "This was your childhood. How did you survive this?" I mean,
I
because I
I
thought,
don't know, Aaron. How did we survive? How did we make it through with a like total sense of humor about it? Because even at the time, it seemed a little bit odd to me. I just felt like, why are we, it's divisive. It's
right,
not bringing people together. And I'm thankful that I mean, I could laugh about it. It just
right,
seemed odd at the time. But I mean, in a way, it just was another level of trying to, I mean, I don't know if control is the right word, but enough, it was a dividing point. There's like
hmm,
us versus them.
right,
And I think that's another thing. I almost felt like this book was just like she tried to put too much into a book that could have been
okay,
separated out into multiple books. It's very
okay,
good. But there are some things that I wish she spent a lot more time talking
okay.
about. Um, but overall, it's really, really fascinating, I think. Um,
Well,
because
I
there's
wonder.
value.
Sorry,
I'm
go
sorry,
ahead.
she was talking about just the difference. Okay, there's the extreme cults, the differences between, and this
Hmm.
is probably obvious, between groups that want to have a sense of belonging, and they
Yeah,
have their rituals, their certain language. The difference is with something that's harmful is that you're not going to be shunned if you
right,
leave or you do something different. You may feel a little guilty because you don't go to Awana or something like that every week,
right,
or something else, uh, you know activities involved
uh
in the
huh,
church. But it's not, that's just nobody's going to excommunicate you because of that.
right.
So
But those, but all subcultures stratify.
yeah.
And so there's really, it's just human nature. There's no way around it, where
Yeah.
you're going to have an inner circle, and then you're going to have concentric circles out from there.
Mhm.
And there's performative ways of being closer, of being more obviously part of the inner circle,
Mhm.
and versus the mid range, and those are on the satellite. And
Yeah.
um, those were their ways in which there are reward mechanisms for being closer to the inner, behavior wise closer to the inner, and
One thing.
there were consequences for being on the satellite. You just weren't part of that inner group.
Mhm.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Right, exactly. One thing I
Yeah.
wanted to ask you about that really stood out to me. I'm sorry, I took notes on this, but
Okay.
she was talking about like how it's important. Like all groups seem to have their, they have their language, and their way of speaking and certain, and some of it is like, talk even through in prayer and talking about being convicted and led and, some of those things that we're used to and that terminology. But in a healthy kind of group or a community, it's turned on and off depending on where you're at. You touched on this earlier, and talking about certain things and you've touched on this before, like the sacred space, sacred places and sacred times when you might use, language that's an important part of our fabric and our faith. But then you step out the door or you go in other circumstances, you're not continuing to talk that way.
Right.
And I thought that was so interesting. But what can you touch on that and what you think about that?
Well, absolutely. I mean, so case in point, Sunday morning, people gather for, worship practices, sacred rites that all occur in this space. And that's actually a place of comfort and a place of intimacy such that people ought to be free to not monitor their language all the time. They ought to be able to just kind of speak freely with the lexicon of their faith without constantly having to interpret. I think that's your safe space, if you will.
Right.
But then you have that discipline of being bilingual, where you go, okay, this all makes sense here. Now I go outside and I'm just really wanting to not have that as a barrier to anyone I interact with outside. But you're right, though. Spatial cues help spatial and temporal cues help you kind of keep that in check.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
For a good example of that, in our tradition, we still use, we use the Book of Common Prayer, which are our service, our readings from the Bible, our prayers are all taken. They're standardized in this manner.
Yeah.
Well, they almost all use the language of Elizabethan King James language. So the readings from the Bible, even the prayers, they have that consistent language in there because that constitutes kind of a reverent consistency.
Right. Yeah. Yep.
But that is the only time when you're going to have that. I mean, right? So
you're not talking out like you're not going out on the street, man on the street and talking that way.
Exactly right. Yes. That's just going to be like you. That's kind of a weird interaction I'm having with you. Why you all of a sudden try to sound like, Kate Blanchett as, Queen Elizabeth, and so that's where that creates those in sacred rites and sacred space and sacred times. Those are the temporal and ritual cues. Like this is the language of reverence that we're using right now. But that's kind of creates the boundaries for that. So for some, that's a benefit to us because it's so radical. It's so on the reverence side that it makes it a little bit easier to shut it off when you step out the building. For others, the temptation might be more to take that religious language with them where they go because they didn't have that clear line of demarcation.
But isn't that the value of the ritual? Is that it makes it special as opposed to just being every day. And I feel like that's, even kind of coming from where the evangelical church, this, certain way that you might speak, like the church speak and in prayers, more formalities. And, but then I remember there were some people that would just continue talking like that, kind of like pepper their conversation with those little buzzwords. And
so for a short time, I taught at a Christian school, and it was really interesting interacting with parents who would send their kids to a Christian school because they would interact with me in that language, right?
Yeah.
And I don't talk that way. I'm used to interacting with policemen, firefighters, anyone else on the street. And so I always felt just way less spiritual than them because I don't maintain that type of Christian speak outside of outside of the ritual, outside of that obvious ritual space. So
but as we remember, it could be a little bit of a competition at times. I felt like
oh gosh,
have you
Have you ever? Well, I was talking to someone the other day about if you've ever been in the spontaneous subculture of a prayer circle,
Right. Yes.
and all of a sudden now you're holding hands, typically with someone you wouldn't touch otherwise, and you are going around in the circle, and each person is needing to up the ante as they go around the circle in terms of the language, the lofty language that they add.
Mm-hmm.
So by the time it comes around to you, you're like, oh my gosh, I can't.
Where
How
do
do
I
I compete
go?
with? Exactly
Yeah,
right. And if you really
exactly.
want to throw everything off, you just say what they said, ditto. And
Exactly.
so,
Ditto. Yeah,
right,
because right. And I don't know. It's just so interesting. That was an interesting part of the book to me. That, and I would
yeah,
like if there was a follow up on the language part of it, because
right, mm-hmm,
that is something that I felt like, and it probably depends on your background, but
mm,
I even to this day I hear people saying things like to love on somebody, and I'm like, oh, I
right,
remember that one.
right, right,
You
right,
know,
exactly, yeah.
I'm just
So,
gonna love on
mm,
them.
could I, could I shift gears just a little bit and
Yeah.
talk about the important place of fear
Hmm.
in a in kind of a in religion that's kind of like taking on cultish tendencies.
Yeah.
There's fear. There's not
Right.
there. I mean, fear is used as a powerful agent in sharing the gospel. You could die tonight. You could be hit by a bus walking out of here. I mean, that's fear used. There's
Right.
fear of if your child is in youth group, they're probably in the back seat of a car up on Inspiration Point. If
Yeah.
you're if your child is if you're listening to rock music, you're probably are given a devil foothold. I mean, it kind of
Right.
tantamount to a Ouija board. And there was fear. There was apocalyptic fear too.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And so there's a. That's why I like M. Night Shyamalan's The Village so well,
Oh,
because
it's
that was
one
a
of the best.
great film about fear and
Yeah.
how people reacted to that to just retreat
Mm-hmm.
into kind of that their own own communal safe space. And
Yeah.
just how are you willing to kind of go into some of our anecdotes about what we saw? I mean, I might even,
Right.
as I'm editing this, I may even edit in a clip of, that
Mm-hmm.
band with Napoleon Dynamite going, I wish we'd all been ready.
Right. Exactly. That every now and then you send me that. It feels like you'll go a couple of years and then you'll send me that clip just as a reminder. It's I do. I have those memories, yes, of, and
Yeah.
I'm still, even now it's interesting to me, like why lean towards the side of fear.
Mm-hmm.
Um
Very
and
powerful motivator.
It is a powerful motivator. I think that, for a lot of people it is. I remember going to a youth camp up at Lassen Pines,
Yeah. Yep.
and really what should have been just like fun kids going crazy having a great, time. Camp was it was a cry fest a lot of the time because
Mm.
of just being, it was like being in middle school,
Right.
being constantly reminded about that you could, which is reality, but that you could
Right.
just be, you could die anytime.
Right.
And, where are you going to go? And it was presented in a way that was just, it was just fear based, I think. And
Yeah.
to get people whipped up and then get a lot of people coming forward, it worked. It absolutely worked for,
Right.
and um, so I don't know. I mean, that stands out in my mind. It never really made sense to me.
Yeah.
Um, and then also just trying to, you and I joke around about the record burning kind of thing, and just feeling like thankfully I felt like we had good parents that gave us a lot of balance. I know
Yeah.
you've touched on this before, and
Right.
while mom and dad were incredibly faithful people and devoted, I think
Uh,
they're like they understood, reality and the real
right.
world. And I felt like they provide a really good balance and support when I Donna Summer record. And she's like, you don't have to. It's fine.
Well,
It's
yeah. Well,
whatever it is.
it's funny because I'm thinking about the legacy of mom and dad and the fact, and
Mhm.
I've reflected on the fact that we could say that we had such a wonderful experience because of our parents, in spite of that, in spite of some religious quirks that we've had to kind of like
Yeah.
talk through. But I would say that
Yeah.
I think that also just reflects the necessity of every family to kind
Right.
of look at how they're part of a religious tradition and say, yeah, this works for our family, this does not. And so
Right.
that's true. I mean, shoot, that's true of just about every family I come across. I mean, I know Roman Catholic families. Heck, I
Yeah.
know even Jewish and Muslim families that vary in their they weren't even in the Christian tradition, that will vary and say these people dive into it so much that they don't ever stop and think about anything they encounter within that ritual space. They just
Right.
adopt it, whether or not it's healthy. And others
Yeah.
will say, no. We're part of the family responsibilities to take what's good and set aside the rest.
Right.
And
Which I'm so
we
grateful
had the
for. I
benefit
mean,
of that.
we had the benefit of that, and 100%. They, there was an expectation with us. We had the foundation, which I'm internally grateful for that, the foundation, and I'm grateful, though. I'll be honest. I feel like because mom and dad were pretty open and allowed me to speak my mind and doubt things, I feel like that I don't feel like I ever had a crisis of faith, like, I
Right.
know a lot of people did that ran the other direction.
Well, I think, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Well, I would say that it did affect me insofar that I became passionate about trying to separate the wheat from the chaff.
Yeah.
I myself wanted to take a deep dive into theology, religion, history, to kind of like, you hear about this all the time. Psychologists will go into counseling to exercise their own demons.
Right.
And so
And
that's
make it right,
often the case.
maybe. Make it right. I think that's kind of a little bit of a different
Right.
turn than maybe I went. It's you were like, hey, it's not sitting well with me,
Right.
I want to make it right. I want to figure this out.
Exactly. So just in the time we have left, I mean, right now, because of world events, we see even now, as I look on X and other online chats, I see kind of a resurrected, well, maybe it's never left, interest in people talking about apocalyptic things.
Right.
And so this sense of filling people with fear as a means of just, this apocalyptic fear of it could happen anytime. You don't know.
Yeah.
And it seems like there's a sense in which I thought that was eventually going to go away, but then it doesn't ever go away. And
has it always been the same, though, Aaron? I mean, that's what I'm wondering. Like,
it certainly is an interesting American phenomenon, though, especially over the last 70 years. I kind of did kind of a cursory trace of apocalyptic preaching and publishing over the last 50 years, and it tends to kind of follow politics in a sense,
right,
and
a little intertwined.
They are intertwined, and so particularly when what someone might call the Christian right, when when an election goes the way in which they would like, all of a sudden now it's like, okay, the Lord might tarry for a time so that we can have a greater impact. But then when the election doesn't go their way, all of a sudden now it's like, any day now, the doctrine of imminency now kind of comes up again, like the imminent return of Christ. And you can follow this in Christian publishing, starting in the mid 70s, and just about every few years, that all of a sudden now it could be any time now.
Happening again.
Well, right. And the term that's oftentimes that I really got to understand in anthropology was ethnocentricity. The idea that the world revolves around what's happening in your culture. So your ethnos, your ethnic experience is so central that so goes you, so goes the world. And that was one of the things that really stood out to me, is like, okay, you think that you expect that God is going to glass and just completely destroy Sri Lanka. because my local election here in the U.S. didn't go the way you want.
Right.
Okay, you understand what you're saying now? That the world's going to come to an end because you lost an eletion here
it's
in
this
the United
level
States?
of self-centeredness that we tend
Right.
to have. Yes. Yeah.
So, well, and that's why kind of in the sacred landscape of things growing up, and maybe I might sound more jaded than you in many ways, but in the sacred calendar, I've been talking about sacred times, and in the sacred calendar, people talk about the high holy days, and there would be Christmas and Easter, and there's other different high holy days. We grew up with basically two, and that was Christmas and 4th of July.
Yes, exactly. Fourth of July is everything.
It was. I mean,
Northern California.
More. I would say that more church resources and money went into that than say the Easter cantata.
Thanks. The cantata. I haven't heard that word in a long time. The living Christmas tree. We should do a whole podcast. Oh my gosh. Yeah.
That's the thing.
I have to say
I try to be careful, though.
Yeah.
I try to be careful. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Sorry. I was going to say Dad used to add to fuel to the fire because he called everything in his half joking way about being un-American. If you're not eating hot dogs and burgers on a 4th of July, it's un-American.
That's an un-American. No, where I may sound too jaded sometimes, but the simple fact is that I do sometimes in other lectures talk about religious statism and that way in which patriotism and piety can overlap too much, and as a result, I mean, I love me some Independence Day. I mean, I really do. But the idea that in many cases we celebrated that more than say Easter. It really
more important things.
Exactly right. And so, but nevertheless, that's some of the funny quirks. But I'm glad we're getting done with the time that we can record this. But I just wanted to have a little discussion about what you'd read and about some of the tendencies we see, because when negative religion, those negative trends, fear, control, in-group, out-group dynamics, secret language, when these things kind of take hold, they can produce negative religion for people. And
absolutely,
I think sometimes that's harmful to the soul.
It is. And I think to have make it like this perception of it being a club, this is an insider's club. And I think that's the mistake that, happens often. Is that we're in, you're out. You want to be part of the club. And it's you can have people that say, yes, I do. I want that. I want to be part of the club. But then there are a lot of other people that's just like, no, I'm not going to, I'm going to run the other way. So I think that is the thing that I remember that I think is concerning, and that I personally, look out for, and not church, but any group, is when it becomes like you're either one of us and you're part of the club or you're not. And I tend to be a little rebellious. So even now.
Really?
Yeah. Yes.
No,
yes.
Well, it's funny. Recently, I read a statistic that one of the leading causes of death in the U.S. right now is medical malpractice.
Really?
Oh yeah.
No kidding.
It's not just malpractice. It's also the interaction with the medical field is such where people tend to get some of the greatest viruses and so forth. It's just the idea is that people have to be very careful when they go into a hospital. They try to keep it antiseptic, but it was really surprising to me. I don't want to be caught lying about this, but it was just staggering to me, the statistics related to how much that has kind of gone up the chain.
That it's even that high up is
exactly right. And so
amazing to me that it's that much of a yes.
So that gives me pause about how religious malpractice is harmful and to people, to the extent that I really want to the podcast that we're having, I really appreciate you participating in. I'm going to look for other people I can talk to then to have frank conversations about,
Yeah.
Where,
Right.
how do we avoid the ways it can go bad? And that actually helps us do it right in many ways too.
Mhm.
So,
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, because in the end, people are searching, and that's,
right.
I
Mhm.
think that's the key. That's
Yeah.
people do want something more.
Right.
Yeah. Anyways, this has been super fun.
Thank you so much. All right. Thank you.